εγώ είμαι Θεός, ο πριν και έστω το παν, και πρωτοστήνε την γη και των ουρανών, κοινός κοντα πάντα, ως όρος Πατρί και όρθερον ενήμη.
Δόξα σοι ο Θεός ημών, δόξα σοι, λόγος συνέστησα των ουρανών αματική, συνείδηνα το Πατρί και διαλόγου φέρω το όδετο παν, ο λόγος σοφία και δύναμης και οίκων και συνεργός και ισουργός.
Δόξα σοι ο Θεός ημών, δόξα σοι.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and today is the end of my third day in Cyprus, and I am currently sitting on a balcony at my hotel in Nicosia. Nicosia is, of course, the capital of Cyprus. In fact, it's the capital of the Republic of Cyprus and the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus. So whichever Cyprus you're interested in, it's still the capital. We're in the Greek bit. But quite interesting, I quite like this balcony because we can see over into the Turkish part of the island, and on the hillside over there, I don't know if you can see, there is an enormous, an enormous flag. Can you see it? Yes, there you can see it. Yeah. That's an enormous flag. In fact, there's two of them. There's a Turkish flag as well, and a Turkish Cypriot flag, and they are done by the Turkish Republic too. One assumes piss off the Greeks, and apparently they were installed a few years ago. They're made of painted stones. I mean, they're absolutely enormous. And apparently they did it in secret, and they painted the stones one by one, but turned them over. And then on the day of Cypriot independence, they turned them all over one by one to reveal them. And at night, the big one also lights up, and it has actually just lit up, but you can't really see it at the moment. So maybe a bit later I'll show that. Although whether it will come out from this distance is another matter, because the camera's not very good. Okay, so what have we done today? What have we done today is, the first thing is, got up in a very nice hotel in what was the name of the place called? In the Trodos Mountains anyway, where we'd been before, and we drove to see more painted churches. So we'd seen 3 on day 2, and we went to see 2 more. There are 10 all told, but the 5 that Alex selected are said to be the best. And the first one, and I'm going to get the name here because I want to make sure I get it right, is the Agio's Nikolaus tis Stέγης in Kakopetria. And Agios Nikolaus is St. Nicholas. It was dedicated to St. Nicholas, who's very popular in the Orthodox world. But tis Stέγης means of the roof. And that's because this church had an incredible roof. So it was a little larger than some of the others, and it had a roof, like a kind of, tiled roof with a cupola in the middle, as Orthodox churches tend to have. But then at a later date, because of the heavy winters and I guess the snow in the winter, they built another roof on top of that. So it had 2 roofs. So it had the normal roof, and then it was kind of another roof built above it. So there was 2 levels of roof. I'd never seen anything like that before. But yeah, that's what they'd done. And so it looked a really strange but interesting building from the outside. And of course, a couple of the first 2 had been a bit bland outside. But this one looked pretty damn cool from the outside. And the setting that it was in a very lush wooded glade, it reminded me so much of some of the churches that I saw in Romania. And if anything is similar to the painted churches of the Trodos Mountains, it is the painted monasteries of Bukovina, which I went to in, I think it was 2012, there or thereabouts. And they were incredible. I actually think I prefer the Trodos ones and the setting is very similar, and that really reminded me of that. So that was great. We went in this one. Unfortunately, we couldn't photograph inside it, and there was an attendant there. But it was interesting. We did manage to talk to the attendant and learn some things, because by this time, this was our fourth one. We were becoming a bit of an expert on these and some of the iconography. So, for example, we'd noticed that at the scenes of the Nativity of Christ, there were two ladies who looked like they were washing him. And I thought, well, that's not in the Bible, in any of the Gospels, because there's not much about the Nativity in the Bible anyway, but, let's gloss over that. But, who were they? And so we found out that it was apparently legends state that St. Joseph had gone to get a midwife, and this midwife and a lady called Salome had come along, and they'd washed Christ. And the reason that it's depicted is because it shows Christ's humanity in that he needed bathing, but also it's a prefiguration of his baptism. So that was that. And another one that we noticed was there was this really striking mural of 40 naked guys, and we couldn't understand who they were. So Alex asked, and it turns out they were 40 Armenian saints, and they were sentenced to death by the Roman authorities. I mean, I looked this up later. They came from what is now Sivas, so it's Sebaste, the 40 martyrs of Sebaste, now Sivas in Turkey, and they were Roman soldiers who'd converted to Christianity, and they were sentenced to death in, I think it was 320 or thereabouts, to be put in a freezing lake and to die of hypothermia in this lake. And next to the lake there was a bathhouse for those that didn't want to die. And as they were going in, one of them was in there for a while, and then he kind of chickened out and ran off to the bathhouse. But another Roman soldier, who was a pagan, was so moved, he took off his clothes and went in to take the guy's place. And so 40 saints, 40 martyrs did die. But also the one that had ran out to go in the bathhouse, the shock of the change in temperature had killed him. And it was this, which was seen as an act of God, which caused one of the pagans to convert on the spot and run in and become a martyr. And apparently these 40 martyrs were really, really big in the Orthodox world in the early centuries. There is a chapel dedicated to them in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And of course I wondered, because the town of Albania, Saranda is Greek for 40, was the town of 40 saints. And I thought, are they connected? And it turns out in that town there was a monastery to these 40 martyrs that was a very big local holy place, and that's when the town got its name. So that's that. Anyway, so we went to this one, really fine church, really fine mosaics, nice, through the ages, from about the 11th century to about the 17th. I did enjoy that one. And then we travelled on. And we travelled on to a small village. I think the village was actually Kakopetria, where the monastery was, but it was about a kilometre or two further on. So, and it's renowned as a very pretty village in Cyprus, and the buildings are protected. So we wandered through this village, and it was quite interesting because the architecture, it was pretty. Often the villages in Cyprus are quite ugly. There's a lot of new buildings. The architecture is generally not that pretty here, and this was an exception. And they all had wooden balconies, but it was not like any architecture I've seen anywhere else. It wasn't Balkan looking, it wasn't Middle Eastern looking. I mean, so far both Alex and I have been reminded very much of Lebanon. We think Cyprus is very similar to Lebanon. In the feel of the place, in that you've got this kind of embattled Christian minority in the mountains that was threatened by the Turks, or in Lebanon the Arabs, as it were. So yeah, I mean, that's the feel, and particularly the mountain villages felt like Bicheri, where we were in Lebanon. But this architecture, I don't know, I'd not seen anything like it. It looked almost slightly Spanish, if anything. So we wandered through there, had a coffee there, and then continued to a place that I wanted to go to, and it was called Ivritou. And Ivritou was the terminus of Cyprus's only railway, built I'm not quite sure. They thought about starting to build it in the Ottoman period, but I think it actually got built in the British period and was operated as the government railway. And it went from Famagusta on the eastern coast to Nicosia and then on to Ivritou. And it went to that area because there were some mines there, which had also served as well as passengers. And this railway station had been ruined, and some British railway enthusiasts, including Hugh Ballantyne, he's a very famous railway photographer, whose books I read some of when I was a kid, because I like my trains, and he'd lived in Cyprus as a boy. They kind of promoted this campaign to get it restored, and the half-ruined building was restored, and they had a wagon there, and when they were restoring the building, the flat roof, which was not original, was shown to contain sections of track. So they used the track to reconstruct about 30 metres of the track in front of the station. And it was a really nice insight into the colonial times. I mean, the railway didn't last long, but it was really, it really did evoke the days of the British Empire. And it would be great if they could ever get a section going again. Although I doubt that will happen, because of course it basically ran along the border between North and South Cyprus these days. So politically that's not going to happen. But yeah, it's a nice little tourist attraction. So we went there, and then we went to our final painted church, which was in another fantastic wooded setting. And this one was a Panagia Asinou church. This was smaller than the first one, and we could take some photos inside. Some really stunning frescoes, as with all of them, and it was nice. And yeah, so now we look for the 40 saints. They were in there. We also look for the the nativity scene with the ladies bathing Christ, and we really getting to understand the art. Another one was the Dormition of Mary. So the Orthodox believe that she fell asleep, she died, and then her body was taken to heaven. Of course, the Catholics believe that Mary was assumed to heaven, the Assumption. The feast is, I believe, on the same day, but they believe different things happened to her. And in the Dormition of Mary, she's lying there kind of sleeping, I guess, in the front. And behind is Christ carrying a baby. And I'm like, well, which baby is he carrying? And later I asked a monk, and he said the baby is Christ himself, and it's to demonstrate that, this is what she did for Christ. And the apostles are all around, and the legend says that the apostles, who of course were all around the world, like St. Thomas had gone to India, St. James had gone to Spain, of course, they came back to pay homage to the Virgin. So that was that. We then moved on, and we were going to go to a place called Tamassos, which is an archaeological reserve, but on the way, so this really gaudy brand new Russian, well, it looked like a cathedral, it looked like something straight out of Siberia. So we stopped there. It was this, the paint was still wet kind of thing, in this enormous gold laden cathedral, and it was been built by an oligarch, which is particularly, in the news at the moment, of course. And it had a Disneyland kind of theme to it. It really was quite tacky, but spectacular at the same time. And there were some interesting frescoes depicting famous Russian saints and scenes from Russian religious history. And what was also interesting is in the same complex, there was a reconstruction of a wooden church of Bukovina in Romania, and there was a Romanian section as well, which was much pleasanter, although you could smell the wood was still new. And there were models of Orthodox cathedrals, so we had our photos taken next to St. Basil's. And that was an interesting little stop. We went to Tamassos. As archaeological sites go, it wasn't that exciting. It was like a shrine or a holy place for Aphrodite, of course. And in the olden days, there were said to be trees with golden leaves, and you could have a golden apple from them. And a famous writer did just that. But the main attraction now are two royal tombs, which you can descend into, and they're quite cool. So we went into these tombs. Although they're empty, they had almost a feel of the Egyptian pyramids. It was quite nice. And then we wanted to go to a nunnery, but that was shut. So we then went to a cave church, and this cave church, halfway up a cliff, that was nice. They built a lift to get up to it, and there was a priest there, or a monk. I think he was a priest because he was married, and it was him that asked about the Dormition of Mary stuff. And apparently this church was there, and it was famous because they found an icon there that was miraculous, as they often are, and it was quite different in terms of the iconography to some of the others. So the icon, we asked where it was, and he said, oh, it's somewhere else for safekeeping. And we were like, oh, well, where is it then? You know, thinking maybe the museum, or, you know, in Kikos Monastery, or in the cathedral. And he said, oh, no, I can't tell you. So the safekeeping was that serious. But yeah, that was quite interesting because we talked to him about a few things. Like, we'd seen wax models of limbs or babies, and also silver plates for things like with eyes on and that. And they're an Orthodox tradition. I think they're called Tanas or something like that. And I said, well, are they for prayers that people want to happen, or for granted prayers to say thank you? He said, well, they're for both. So, you know, it was all really interesting. And then we arrived in Nicosia, a little bit of a difficult time because we had to give the car back, and we had to put it full of petrol. And so there weren't many petrol stations. And when we found one, it would only take, it was very hard. It was a self-service one, and you had to like pre-program how much you wanted to pay in. Well, we didn't know how much we wanted to put in. We just wanted to fill the damn thing up. So, well, we managed that in the end, went to the rental office, dropped the car off, and then came here to our hotel, which is where I am now, and, well, going to go out for a meal soon when it's dark. But in the meantime, that's it from me. Tomorrow we'll be exploring Nicosia and talk to you more about that then, though only the Greek half are going to have the Turkish half the day after. So that's thanks for listening, and always keep travelling. And I don't know if you can see it, but the flag is lighting up. So there it is. I don't know. There you see the flag doth light up on the side. Keep travelling.
Είδετε ότι εγώ είμαι Θεός, ο πριν γενέσω το παν, και πρωτοστήνε την